Rolex wasn't meant to be the iconic luxury brand it is today. It was a relatively new entrant into the watchmaking industry in 1905. The young challenger eventually took over the market with reliable products and a great insight into innovation. Born in Kumbach, Germany, Hans Wilsdorf was going to have a promising life with his father's successful hardware store until his mother and father died at the age of 12. He moved in with his maternal uncles, who upheld a strong work ethic, an appreciation for self-reliance, and a pride in caring for one's possessions. Wilsdorf later claimed these were cornerstones in his success. After graduating, he worked for a pearl distributor who sourced and graded pearls for sale to jewelers. He learned of importing and exporting here, which led to his next job in Le Champ de Fonds for an exporter in pocket watches. As part of his duties, Wilsdorf wound hundreds of watches per day and checked them for accuracy. The vast majority of watches manufactured at the time were distinguished by their miserable quality, which was worse than merely poor. This led to an idea to create a reliable timepiece that could more conveniently be worn on the wrist. Wristwatches at the time were worn by women, but not by men. His first attempt to start his own business in 1903 led to him being robbed of his investment of 33,000 francs, or roughly $235,000 in today's money. His second attempt came after convincing his sister and brother to give him part of their inheritance. He tried again with additional funding from his brother-in-law, Alfred Davis. They founded Wilsdorf and Davis Limited in 1905 in London, England. With the help of Egler Manufacturing, who built the movements, they started selling the watches quickly through distributors who branded their own names on them. Rolex introduced their names on the dials over time by sneaking them into different batches as they were shipped out to the distributors. Given wristwatches' inaccuracy, men still believed that pocket watches were the thing to have, but they were far less convenient. That stigma changed after World War I when soldiers grew accustomed to wearing watches like Rolex watches on their wrist to see the time easily in combat. In 1914, on the wave of the increase in orders, Wilsdorf was looking for a new name for the company. He wanted a catchier 5-letter name like Kodak, which was famous at the time. Rolex came to his mind on a bus from a benign spirit, Wilsdorf called it. Early on, Wilsdorf wanted to differentiate his products, so he submitted them to the Kew Observatory, which graded marine chronometers, which were clocks for ships that helped them navigate. A Rolex watch was the first wristwatch certified A grade by the chronometry. Rolex moved to Geneva in 1915 when England levied a 33% tax on all goods exported from England to recoup the losses of World War I. Here, Davis bought a stake in Egler, the movement manufacturer, and bought out his brother-in-law Alfred Davis. 1926 saw the next large innovation, the Rolex Oyster, a waterproof watch to 15 meters depth due to the design. The case was hermetically sealed with a bezel that screwed on the front of the watch and a case back that screwed on the back. The biggest innovation was the crown that screwed on the side, a patent that Wilsdorf bought from Paul Perot and George Perret as soon as Wilsdorf learned of the invention. With the crown invention, the Rolex Oyster was born. In 1927, the marketing genius began one of his best strategies, tying the brand to major accomplishments. He asked Mercedes Gleitz to wear the Rolex Oyster for the record-breaking swim across the 20.5 miles of the English Channel on October 21, 1927. Fixed to a necklace around Gleitz's neck, the watch was submerged in frigid waters for over 10 hours. While Gleitz did not make it the whole way there, the watch survived all 10 hours in the water, keeping perfect time. Wilsdorf published ads with her testimonial for years to come, jump-starting the beginning of Rolex's major ascent. The marketing didn't stop there. He hired famous models to wear the watch in ads with their hand wearing the watch submerged in a fishbowl. Also, at local dealers of the watch company, it was displayed often suspended inside of a fishbowl with fish swimming around it as it kept accurate time. In 1931 was the next large step. The Oyster had the downside of requiring it be unscrewed and wound often every day. Wilsdorf sought to solve this. John Harwood had already come out with a bumper movement, using a weight to bounce back and forth between springs inside the movement to turn a gear that wound the watch. Wilsdorf refined this idea, creating one weight that could rotate a full 360 degrees around the watch case. As the wearer's arm moved, the weight spun, winding the watch. This created the Oyster Perpetual. He also famously put the watch on the wrist of Evelyn Lane, a famous model at the time, and Malcolm Campbell, who broke the land speed record in 1936 at 300 miles per hour. In 1945, near the tail end of World War II, the next big model was unveiled, the Datejust. Though other watches showed the date on the dial, like the Girard-Perregaux Minimo, this was the first automatic watch to do it. In 1946, Hans Wilsdorf officially registered Montrez Tudor SA. Though Wilsdorf had in fact produced Tudor watches in some capacity for the Australian market since since the early 1930s, after the war, Wilsdorf decided it was time to publicly create the company. The concept was the same reliability in a more affordable package. In 1947, just 3 years after Rolex produced its 50,000th chronometer watch, the brand produced its 100,000th chronometer watch. To commemorate, Rolex gifted a Datejust to Churchill, who wore it proudly. 1951, Rolex produced its 150,000th chronometer. Continuing the pattern of honoring great heroes of World War II, this time Rolex wanted to give the watch to Dwight D. Eisenhower, who would later be president and wear it most of the time. 1953 to 1956 were pivotal years for Rolex. In these years, they introduced the Cyclops. It was created due to his second wife, who had poor eyesight and had a hard time reading the date on the Datejust. So when a drop of water fell on the crystal one day, it caused Wilsdorf to exclaim, "Eureka!" The magnification had made it more visible. Wilsdorf fought this legal patent against any who crossed it. The second major development of 1953 was the Turnograph. The watch was the very first mass-produced Rolex to feature a rotatable bezel. In the same time frame, father and son team Auguste and Jacques Picard attached a Rolex Deep Sea Special to the outside of their bathyscaphe Trieste and descended to a depth of 3,150 meters. The watch functioned perfectly. In 1953, Rolex also equipped all members of John Hunt's 1953 Mount Everest expedition team with Rolex Oyster Perpetuals with special lubricants designed for -20 degrees Celsius. Because 2 members of the team, Sir Edmund Hillary and Tenzing Norway, became the first humans ever to summit Mount Everest, Rolex assumed that Oyster Perpetuals were on their wrists. They commemorated this event later with the Rolex Explorer. In 1954, they finally released the Submariner with a 200-meter water resistance rating for professional divers. From 1954 to 1955, the Gmt Master was born, a watch designed in collaboration with Pan Am to let pilots track both local time and Greenwich Mean Time to communicate with other airports. 1956, the Day-Date was born, which later became the President-style watch after Lyndon B. Johnson famously wore his, as did other presidents. Rolex even advertised it as the President's watch in the 1960s, dubbing their bracelet the President-style bracelet. In 1956, the Milgauss was born, a watch designed for scientists working at CERN to withstand magnetism due to the watch movement being built in a Faraday cage. After all these innovations, in 1960, Wilsdorf passed at the age of 79, leaving 100% of the company to the Wilsdorf Foundation, which was originally created as a local charity. It is still operated that way and therefore does not pay taxes and cannot go public. Famous models released between 1956 and 1971 include 1963, the Rolex Cosmograph Daytona. In response to the popularity of racing and chronographs, it was unpopular at the time but grew to be the most popular of their current offering. In 1967, the Sea Dweller was born, a more capable Submariner with increased water resistance, a thicker case and profile, and a helium escape valve. In 1971, the Rolex Explorer 2 was born, designed for cave divers to know the time on the surface when they hadn't seen the sun, either AM or PM. The next hurdle came in the 70s. It's called the quartz crisis. In 1969, Seiko released the first quartz watch, offering what eventually became a cheaper, more easily manufactured, and more accurate time-telling mechanism for a watch. During this time frame, from 1970 to 1983, the number of Swiss watchmakers dropped from 1,600 to 600. Rolex persisted without quartz technology in their movement for a long time until finally releasing their Oyster Quartz in 1977. But that was near the tail end of the crisis before the Swatch Group had turned around production for mechanical watches and popularized their return. At this point, major surviving brands in the early 80s pivoted their marketing. Rolex, having a history of reliable, well-built movements, coupled this reliability with their marketing towards the luxury space, justifying their price through their ability to be passed down. The marketing worked, and Rolex built year after year on this message to create the reliable luxury brand we have today, as well as the image of Rolex that we all know. Since the early 80s, several different models have been introduced, but the majority of their current innovations of the last decade have been within the watch: the Chronogy escapement, the Parachrome and Saloxi hairsprings, and Paraflex shock absorbers, to name a few. For more Rolex content or deep dives, let us know down below. Thanks for watching.